You were in no condition to make decisions. That's what the recording captured, my mother-in-law's voice crystal clear as she pressured my sedated father to sign the amended trust documents. I played it back 3 times, sitting alone in my hospital room, the incision from my emergency surgery still throbbing with each heartbeat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eliza Morgan, 35 years old, high school literature teacher in Oakridge, Connecticut. 8 hours earlier, I'd been rushed into emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix that had turned septic. By the time I regained consciousness, my father's estate had a new beneficiary, and it wasn't me. I met Raymond Foster when I was 27. He was charming, successful, and attentive in all the ways that mattered during those early dating days. His mother, Vivian, had been widowed young and raised Raymond alone, creating a bond between them that I initially found touching. When Raymond proposed after 18 months of dating, Vivian was the first person he called, even before we left the restaurant where he had dropped to one knee. The wedding was beautiful, if not exactly what I had envisioned. Vivian had strong opinions about everything from the venue to the cake flavor, and Raymond always deferred to her judgment. "She's planned events professionally for 30 years, he would remind me whenever I pushed back, and she's just excited to be involved. I chose my battles carefully, wanting to start our marriage without unnecessary tension. My father, James Geller, was a successful architect who had built a comfortable life through decades of careful work and investment. My mother had passed away from breast cancer when I was in college, leaving him alone in the sprawling craftsman house he had designed himself on 3 acres overlooking Silver Lake. When he was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years into my marriage, I became his primary caregiver, balancing my teaching job with daily visits to his home. Raymond was supportive in his own way, though he rarely accompanied me on those visits. "You two need your time together," he would say. "Besides, your father always gets confused about who I am anyway." This was true. Dad's condition progressed steadily, and names began to slip away first. 3 months ago, my father's neurologist recommended moving him to assisted living, where he could receive round-the-clock care. "His condition is accelerating," Dr. Lassiter explained during our consultation. "He needs more supervision than you can reasonably provide while working full-time." I knew she was right, but the decision felt like failure nonetheless. The day we toured Morningside Gardens, the premier memory care facility in the area, Dad was having one of his clearer days. He understood where we were and why, and he gripped my hand as we walked through the sunny common areas. "It seems nice enough," he said quietly, "but expensive, I imagine." He wasn't wrong. Morningside Gardens cost nearly $8,000 per month, a figure that would quickly deplete his savings despite his careful financial planning. After the tour, over coffee in the facility's cafe, Dad asked to speak with me privately. "I need to tell you something important," he said, his blue eyes suddenly sharp and focused. "I've updated my trust. The house and investments are structured to pay for my care, but everything that remains will come to you when I'm gone. I've set it up properly with Mitchell." Mitchell Granger had been my father's attorney and friend for over 30 years. They had met in college and remained close even as their career paths diverged. Mitchell had handled all my parents' legal matters, from their wills to the trust that now held my father's assets. "Dad, we don't need to talk about this now," I said, not wanting to think about a future without him. "We do," he insisted, a flash of his old authority breaking through the cognitive fog, "because I may not remember tomorrow. The paperwork is in my desk, top right drawer. The trust pays for Morningside first, then the rest is yours. I've earmarked some for those scholarships we discussed too." Each year, my father funded 2 architecture scholarships at his alma mater in my mother's name. I nodded, eyes filling with tears. I'll make sure it's all handled exactly as you want. I know you will, he said, patting my hand. You've always been responsible, like your mother. When I told Raymond about the updated trust later that night, his response surprised me. Did he say how much would be left after the care facility? That's not really the point, I replied, taken aback by the question. He wants to make sure his wishes are clear while he still can express them. Of course, Raymond quickly agreed. I just want to make sure you're taken care of if something happens. These places can drain even substantial estates. Mitchell has structured everything properly, I assured him, though a small knot of discomfort formed in my stomach at his focus on the financial aspects. The next morning, Vivian called, something she rarely did directly. Usually, any communication came through Raymond. I hear James is going to Morningside, she said without preamble. Very expensive choice. Raymond says you're worried about the cost. I never said that, I corrected, already feeling defensive. Dad's financial situation is solid. Well, regardless, I have a colleague whose brother-in-law works in elder law. He might be able to help restructure things more advantageously. I'll have him call you. That's really not necessary, I replied firmly. Dad's attorney has handled everything. Vivian made a small noise of disapproval. Mitchell Granger is an old-school generalist. These situations require specialists. Before I could respond, she continued, Anyway, I've already passed along your number. His name is Jeffrey Pearson, very well regarded. I never took Jeffrey Pearson's call, letting it go to voicemail twice before he stopped trying. I did, however, call Mitchell to ensure everything was in order with my father's trust. The arrangements are exactly as James requested, Mitchell assured me. The trust is ironclad. It pays for his care first, then distributions to you and the scholarship fund as specified. Has something changed? No, I said, not wanting to explain my mother-in-law's interference, just double-checking. The week Dad moved into Morningside, Raymond and I went to his house to collect some personal items to make his new apartment feel more homelike. His favorite reading chair, family, photos, the hand-knit Afghan my mother had made during her final months. While I was carefully wrapping framed photographs, Raymond wandered into my father's study. Have you looked through his papers yet? He called out. We should probably organize everything. Not yet, I replied, joining him in the wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and my father's pipe tobacco, a habit he had given up years ago, though the scent lingered in the furnishings. I'll go through it all eventually. Raymond was already opening desk drawers, lifting out folders. Better to handle it now while we're here. Where did he keep important documents? Top right drawer, I said, remembering my father's words. But I don't think we need to. Here they are, Raymond interrupted, pulling out a thick manila envelope labeled Trust Documents J. Keller. He opened it and began flipping through the contents. Mitchell Granger's contact information is on these. We should probably touch base with him directly at some point. I already spoke with him last week, I said, gently taking the envelope from Raymond's hands and returning it to the drawer. Everything's in order. Raymond's expression flickered briefly. Disappointment? Frustration? I couldn't quite place it before he nodded. Just trying to help. This is a lot for you to manage alone. I appreciate that, I said, though something about his interest felt off. Raymond had never shown much concern for financial matters before, happy to let me handle our household budget and banking. That night, I overheard him on the phone in his home office, the door not quite closed. Yes, I looked, but she put everything away. No, I don't know exactly how much, but the house alone must be worth over $1 million in that location. Of course, I understand the implications, Mother. I stepped away quietly, heart pounding. Was my husband actually discussing my father's assets with Vivian? I wanted to confront him, but something held me back, a desire to observe rather than accuse, to understand what might be happening before I raised alarms. The next day, I returned to Dad's house alone, ostensibly to continue packing personal items. Once there, I went straight to his study and opened the top right drawer. The trust documents were where I had left them, seemingly untouched. I scanned through them, confirming what I already knew. The house and investments were held in trust, with provisions for Dad's care at Morningside Gardens, and I was the sole beneficiary after those expenses, with a portion designated for the scholarship fund. I also found my father's voice recorder, a small digital device he had used for years to record notes and ideas for his architectural projects. In the early stages of his cognitive decline, he had relied on it heavily, leaving himself reminders and observations he feared he might forget. I slipped it into my purse, thinking it might contain memories worth preserving. That night, after Raymond had fallen asleep, I listened to the recorder's contents. Most files were as expected. Brief, notes about measurements, materials, or design ideas. Some were more personal. Remember to call Eliza about Sunday dinner, or ask Mitchell about updating the trust. I was about to set it aside when I noticed a file dated just 2 weeks ago, after Dad had already begun showing significant confusion. I pressed play, hearing first the ambient sounds of a room, then my father's voice, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Is this about the house papers? I thought Mitchell already." Then Vivian's voice, artificially warm. "James, dear, we just need to clarify a few things about your arrangements. Raymond is concerned that Eliza might be overwhelmed managing your estate while you're at Morningside." My father, confused. "Eliza knows what to do. The trust." "Yes, the trust," Vivian interrupted smoothly. "We've brought Mr. Pearson here to help update it slightly. Nothing major, just some adjustments to ensure everything is properly protected." A male voice I didn't recognize. "These are the amended documents, Mr. Keller. They simply add Raymond as a co-trustee alongside Eliza and make a few provisions for family security." Dad, sounding increasingly disoriented, "I don't." "Mitchell handles my papers." Vivian, firmer now. "Mitchell is on vacation, James. This can't wait with your condition. We're just helping while Eliza is busy with school. You want to make sure Raymond can help her with these complex matters, don't you?" A long pause. Then my father, almost childlike in his confusion. "Where's Eliza? I want to ask Eliza." "She's teaching today," Vivian said smoothly. "She knows about this. It was her idea, actually, to take some pressure off her." Another male voice, Raymond's. "It's really for the best, James. Let me help Eliza with this burden." More rustling of papers, then Vivian again. "Just sign here and here. Good. You've done the right thing, James." My father, barely audible. "I'm very tired now." "Of course you are," Vivian said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We'll let you rest." The recording continued for another minute. The sounds of papers being gathered, footsteps, a door closing. Then silence. I sat frozen in my bedroom, the blood rushing in my ears. They had manipulated my confused father into signing documents without my knowledge. Documents that apparently made Raymond a co-trustee with authority over my father's estate. I wanted to wake Raymond immediately, confront him with the evidence of this betrayal. But some instinct for self-protection held me back. I needed to understand exactly what they had done before I revealed what I knew. I needed to speak with Mitchell. The next morning, I called Mitchell's office and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon, claiming a quick question about my father's move to Morningside. I told Raymond I had a department meeting after school, the first direct lie of our marriage, but now seemingly necessary. When I arrived at Mitchell's office, his assistant showed me in immediately. Mitchell rose from behind his desk, his tall frame slightly stooped with age, his handshake warm as always. "Eliza, good to see you. How's James settling in at Morningside?" "He's adjusting," I said, not wanting to waste time on pleasantries. "Mitchell, I need to know if anyone has filed amendments to my father's trust recently." Mitchell frowned. "Amendments? No, nothing has crossed my desk. The trust is structured exactly as we discussed with James while he was still fully competent. Why do you ask?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Mitchell's expression darkened as he listened, his normally genial features hardening into something I'd never seen before. "When was this recorded?" he asked when it finished. "2 weeks ago, based on the file date. My father-in-law came to the house with some attorney named Pearson." "Jeffrey Pearson," Mitchell muttered, typing the name into his computer. "He's with Westlake and Partner, specializes in estate modifications and asset protection." He looked up at me, his eyes serious. "Eliza, if they've filed amended trust documents with your father's signature while he's been medically documented as cognitively impaired, that's fraud, plain and simple. What should I do? First, we need to find out if they've actually filed anything. I can have my paralegal check the county records. If they have, we can test it immediately on grounds of diminished capacity. That recording is damning evidence." I nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved to have Mitchell's support and devastated by my husband's betrayal. "I haven't confronted Raymond yet. I wanted to understand what we're dealing with first." Mitchell regarded me thoughtfully. "That's wise. If they've committed fraud, tipping your hand too early could complicate things." He paused. "Eliza, I have to ask, have you had any health issues recently? Anything that might make them think you're not in a position to manage the trust yourself?" "No, nothing significant, just the usual stress of teaching and caring for Dad." Mitchell made a note on his legal pad. "I'll call you as soon as we know whether they've filed anything. In the meantime, carry on normally if you can. And Eliza, make a backup of that recording, several backups." I left Mitchell's office feeling as though the ground beneath me had shifted. The man I had married, the man I shared my life with, had conspired with his mother to take advantage of my father's condition for financial gain. How had I missed such fundamental dishonesty in Raymond's character? What else might I have been blind to? That evening I made dinner as usual, asked Raymond about his day, and didn't mention my visit to Mitchell. I watched him across the dining table, searching his familiar features for signs of the stranger he had apparently been all along. He noticed my scrutiny. "Everything okay? You're quiet tonight." "Just tired," I lied. "End of semester is always draining." He nodded sympathetically. "Why don't you take a bath after dinner? I'll clean up." His solicitude, which I would have found thoughtful just days ago, now seemed calculated. Was he being kind, or just managing me? I couldn't tell anymore, and the uncertainty made my stomach clench. The next morning, I received a text from Mitchell. "Documents filed yesterday. Come to the office ASAP." I called in sick to school for the first time in 3 years and drove directly to Mitchell's office. The paralegal, Jessica, had obtained copies of the filed documents. "It's worse than we thought," Mitchell said grimly, spreading the papers on his desk. "They didn't just make Raymond a co-trustee. They've completely restructured the distribution provisions." I scanned the documents, legal terminology swimming before my eyes, until Mitchell pointed to the key paragraph. "They've added Raymond as the primary beneficiary of the trust after your father's care expenses. You're still included, but only for a specific bequest of $100,000. Everything else, the house, the investment accounts, all of it would go to Raymond." The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it momentarily stole my breath. Can they do this? My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He wasn't competent to make these changes. No, they can't. This is textbook undue influence and exploitation of a cognitively impaired individual. With your father's medical records and that recording, we have a solid case to invalidate these amendments." Mitchell leaned forward, his expression grave. "But Eliza, this is going to get messy, legally and personally. Are you prepared for that?" Was I prepared to legally battle my husband and mother-in-law? To potentially end my marriage over this betrayal? The questions hung heavy in the air between us. "I have to protect my father," I said finally, "whatever that takes." Mitchell nodded, satisfied with my resolve. "We'll file a petition to invalidate, immediately, on grounds of your father's diminished capacity and evidence of undue influence. We'll also seek a temporary injunction preventing any disposition of assets while this is being resolved." "What about Raymond and Vivian?" "Once we file, they'll be served notice of the petition. At that point, they'll know you're contesting the amendments." He paused. "It might be safer if you weren't living with Raymond when that happens." The practical reality of what this meant for my marriage hit me fully for the first time. I think he might react badly. People do unpredictable things when financial schemes are exposed, Mitchell said carefully. Better to be cautious. I nodded, mind racing. "I can stay with my friend Andrea for a while. She has a guest room and has been offering to help since Dad's diagnosis." "Good. Pack what you need while Raymond is at work, then leave. Don't tell him where you're staying." Mitchell's tone was gentle but firm. "And Eliza, back up that recording everywhere. Email it to yourself, to me, store it in multiple cloud accounts. That recording is our strongest evidence." As I drove home to pack an emergency bag, my phone rang. The screen displayed Morningside Gardens. My heart raced as I answered. "Mrs. Foster, this is Nurse Daniels at Morningside. Your father has had a fall. He's stable, but the doctor would like him to have some tests at Hartford Memorial to rule out any serious injury." "I'll be right there," I said, already redirecting toward the care facility. When I arrived, Dad was sitting in a wheelchair. In the lobby, a small cut visible on his forehead, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Nurse Daniels explained that he had become disoriented during his morning walk and had fallen against a coffee table. "The ambulance is on its way," she explained. "It's probably just a precaution, but with his condition, the doctor wants to be thorough." I knelt beside my father, taking his hand. "It's okay, Dad. I'm here now." He smiled vaguely, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Elizabeth?" he asked, calling me by my mother's name. "It's Eliza, Dad, your daughter." "Of course," he said, though his expression remained uncertain. "Are we going somewhere?" "Just to the hospital for a little checkup. Nothing to worry about." The ambulance arrived, and I followed in my car to Hartford Memorial. The emergency department was busy, but Dad was taken back relatively quickly due to his age and condition. I provided his medical history to the intake nurse, including his Alzheimer's diagnosis and medication list. "The doctor will be in shortly," she assured me after getting Dad settled in a curtained bay. "These scans shouldn't take too long." As I sat beside Dad's gurney, my phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. "Where are you? School called looking for you." I hesitated, then replied simply, "Dad had a fall. At hospital for tests. We'll update later." His response came quickly. "Which hospital? I'll come." Something in me resisted providing this information. "Not necessary. Minor issue. Handling it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Call me when you know more." The ER doctor, a brisk woman named Dr. Chen, arrived to examine my father. "We'll get a head CT to rule out any bleeding," she explained. "With his history of Alzheimer's, we want to be extra cautious." "How long will that take?" I asked, suddenly aware that I needed to use this unexpected hospital visit to pack and leave before confronting Raymond. "We're backed up today, so probably a couple of hours from now until you have results." Dr. Chen studied me. "Are you okay? You look pale." "Just worried about my dad," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "He's stable. His vitals are good. This is precautionary." She patted my arm reassuringly. "The nurse can show you to the family waiting area if you need to step out for food or coffee." After she left, I sat holding Dad's hand as he dozed. My mind raced through everything that needed to happen. Pack essential items, arrange to stay with Andrea, coordinate with Mitchell about the legal filings, all while managing my father's care and processing the complete upheaval of my life. My phone buzzed again. "Raymond, stopping by Morningside. They said you took James to Hartford Memorial. On my way there." Panic surged through me. I wasn't ready to face Raymond yet, not until I had secured my position and consulted further with Mitchell. I texted back, "No need. They're about to take him for tests. Meet me at home later." But I knew he was coming anyway. Raymond had never been deterred from a course of action once he decided on it, a quality I had once admired as determination, but now recognized as potential stubbornness. Or worse. I leaned close to my drowsy father. "Dad, I need to step out for a minute to make a call. I'll be right back, okay?" He nodded sleepily, and I slipped out to the hallway, finding a quiet corner near a supply closet. I called Mitchell. "Raymond is on his way to the hospital," I said without preamble. "I'm not ready to confront him yet." "Where are you exactly?" Mitchell asked. "Hartford Memorial ER. My dad had a fall. Is he okay?" "Seems to be. Waiting on scans." I took a deep breath. "Mitchell, what do I do if Raymond gets here before I can leave?" "Act normal," he advised. "Don't give any indication that you know about the trust amendments. We've already started the filing process. By tomorrow, they'll be served official notice." He paused. "Can you go somewhere else in the hospital? Cafeteria, perhaps?" "I can't leave my dad alone. He's confused and might try to get up if he wakes up disoriented." "Understood." Mitchell's tone was thoughtful. "Is there hospital security nearby?" "Yes, there's a security desk at the ER entrance. If you feel threatened in any way, don't hesitate to ask for their assistance. But hopefully it won't come to that. Just remain calm and give away nothing about what you know." After hanging up, I returned to Dad's curtained area. He was still sleeping peacefully. I sat beside him, heart pounding, as I waited for either the transport team to take him for his CT scan or for Raymond to appear. Each passing minute stretched my nerves tighter. 20 minutes later, a transport aide arrived with a wheelchair. "Time for Mr. Keller's CT scan," she announced cheerfully. "You can wait here or in the family lounge on the second floor." "I'll stay with him," I decided, not wanting to risk missing Raymond in the family lounge and having him find my father. Alone, as we wheeled toward the imaging department, I glanced back toward the ER entrance and saw Raymond striding through the automatic doors, scanning the waiting area. I turned away quickly, hoping he hadn't spotted us yet, and followed the transport aide into the elevator. The imaging department was quieter than the bustling ER, with subdued lighting and fewer people rushing about. Dad was transferred to the CT table, while I was directed to a small waiting area just outside. "It'll be about 20 minutes, the technician informed me. "We'll bring him right back out to you." I nodded, then pulled out my phone to text Andrea. "Emergency situation. Need to stay with you, possibly starting tonight. We'll explain later." Her reply was immediate. "Of course. Whatever you need, I'm home all evening." I sank into a molded plastic chair, exhaustion suddenly catching up with me. The emotional whiplash of the past few days, discovering the recording, learning of Raymond and Vivian's betrayal, now hiding from my own husband in a hospital, was overwhelming. After a few minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. "At ER. Nurse said you went to imaging. Which floor?" I stared at the message, debating whether to answer truthfully. Before I could decide, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged, and Raymond stepped out, spotting me immediately. He walked toward me, concern etched on his familiar features, features I now viewed with suspicion and hurt. "There you are," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. I managed not to flinch. "How's James? What happened?" "Minor fall at Morningside," I explained, keeping my voice neutral. "They're doing a CT to rule out any bleeding, but the doctor thinks he's fine." Raymond sat beside me, placing his hand over mine on the armrest. "You should have called me right away. You don't have to handle everything alone." The irony of his statement, coming from the man who had secretly manipulated my vulnerable father, made me want to scream. Instead, I shrugged. It happened quickly. I was focused on getting him here. "Well, I'm here now," Raymond said, squeezing my hand. "We're in this together." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat in silence for several minutes, my mind racing while I maintained an outward calm. Finally, I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect my thoughts. In the privacy of the bathroom stall, I texted Mitchell. Raymond found me at hospital, acting completely normal. Hard to keep up pretense. His response was prompt. "Stay calm. Just a few more hours. Filing will be completed today, service. By tomorrow morning." When I returned to the waiting area, the CT technician was wheeling my father back out. "Everything went smoothly," she reported. "The radiologist will review the images and report to your doctor." "Thank you," I said, moving to my father's side. He looked up at me, then at Raymond, confusion clouding his features. "Who is this?" he asked, gesturing toward my husband. Raymond's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's Raymond James, your son-in-law." Dad frowned, looking to me for confirmation. "Elizabeth's husband?" "Eliza's husband," I gently corrected. "I'm Eliza, Dad. Mom was Elizabeth." "Of course," he murmured, though his expression remained uncertain. We returned to the ER, where Dad was settled back in his curtained area. Dr. Chen appeared shortly after, tablet in hand. "Good news," she announced. "CT is clear. No sign of bleeding or fracture. He can return to Morningside, but they should monitor him for the next 24 hours for any changes in mental status or new symptoms." Relief washed over me. At least this crisis was resolving simply. "Thank you, Doctor. Can I take him back now?" "Yes, we'll get his discharge paperwork started. Should be about 30 minutes. As Dr. Chen left, Raymond's phone rang. He checked the screen. "It's Mother," he said, stepping out of the curtained area to take the call. I watched him go, then turned my attention to Dad, who was looking increasingly tired. "We'll have you back home soon," I promised, smoothing his thinning hair away from the small bandage on his forehead. "Home," he repeated, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "To Morningside," I clarified gently. "Your new apartment, remember?" His face fell. "Not my house." "No, Dad. But it's a nice place. Safe for you." He nodded resignedly, then closed his eyes. I sat holding his hand until Raymond returned, his expression troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked, maintaining the pretense of normalcy. "Fine," he said shortly. "Mother just wanted an update on James." How thoughtful of Vivian to check on my father's welfare, I thought bitterly, given how she had exploited his cognitive decline just weeks earlier. But I simply nodded. The discharge process took longer than estimated, closer to an hour, during which Raymond made several more calls, stepping away each time. I observed him surreptitiously, noting the increasing tension in his posture, the furrowed brow as he spoke in hushed tones. Was he discussing the trust with Vivian, planning their next move? The uncertainty was excruciating. Finally, Dad was officially discharged. Raymond helped me get him into my car for the drive back to Morningside. "I'll follow you," Raymond said, heading toward his own vehicle. The drive to Morningside Gardens took 20 minutes, during which I called Andrea from my car's Bluetooth system, careful to speak in generalities with my father present. "Still okay if I come by later?" I asked when she answered. "Absolutely." Andrea confirmed. Everything ready for you. Is this about what we discussed last month? Andrea was referring to a hypothetical conversation we'd never had, her way of asking if this was related to my father's condition. No, something different, I replied. I'll explain when I see you. Got it. Doors open whenever you arrive. May. At Morningside, the staff helped Dad back to his apartment. The nurse on duty reviewed the discharge instructions and assured me they would monitor him closely. Dad was tired and confused by all the activity, so after making sure he was comfortable, I kissed his forehead and promised to visit the next day. Raymond was waiting in the lobby, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached. Ready to go home? Home. The word struck me as tragically ironic. The place I had shared with Raymond was no longer a sanctuary, but a site of betrayal. Still, I nodded. Yes, it's been a long day. As we walked to our separate cars, Raymond said, I'll stop and pick up dinner. You shouldn't have to cook after all this. Thank you, I replied mechanically, unlocking my car door. Chinese okay? From Golden Dragon? Sure. I managed a small smile, the muscles in my face feeling stiff with the effort of maintaining this charade. As I drove home, I contemplated my next moves. I needed to pack essentials while Raymond was picking up dinner, enough to stay with Andrea, for at least a few days while the legal process unfolded. I also needed to secure my important documents, passport, birth certificate, financial records. And I needed to gather any additional evidence of Raymond and Vivian's scheme that might be in our house. When I arrived home, I moved quickly. First, I located my personal documents in our shared office, tucking them into a tote bag along with my laptop. Then I went to our bedroom, pulling a suitcase from the back of the closet and filling it with clothes and toiletries. Enough for about a week. I added sentimental items that couldn't be replaced. My mother's pearl necklace, the small wooden box my father had carved for my 16th birthday, photos from before my marriage. As I was zipping the suitcase, I heard the garage door opening. Raymond was home sooner than I expected. Quickly, I slid the suitcase under the bed and carried the tote bag of documents to my car, managing to stow it in the trunk just as Raymond entered through the kitchen door. They were quick tonight, he called out, the aroma of Chinese food filling the house. Where are you? Just getting changed, I replied, hurrying back inside and upstairs to swap my wrinkled clothes for fresh, one's heart pounding at the close call. When I came downstairs, Raymond had set the dining table with actual plates and silverware rather than our usual casual approach to takeout. He'd even opened a bottle of wine. Thought we could use a nice dinner after the stress of today, he explained, pulling out my chair. The domesticity of the scene, my husband serving dinner, pouring wine, asking about my father's condition with apparent concern, created a surreal dissonance against what I now knew about his true character. I ate mechanically, answering his questions with minimal detail, watching him for any sign that he suspected what I had discovered. You seem distant, he finally observed, refilling my wineglass. Is there something else going on with your father that you're not telling me? The question felt like a trap, though I couldn't determine its exact nature. Just processing everything, I said vaguely. It's been overwhelming. Raymond reached across the table to take my hand. I know, it has, but remember we're partners in this. Whatever happens with your father, with his care, with the house eventually, we'll handle it together. I looked down at our joined hands, at the wedding ring I had worn proudly for 8 years. Together, I echoed, the word hollow in my mouth. After dinner, Raymond insisted on cleaning up while I rested. I retreated to the living room couch, pretending to watch television, while actually texting Mitchell for updates. Filing complete, he confirmed. Service scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Are you somewhere safe? Still at home, I replied, planning to leave tonight. Good. Call me when you're settled. Raymond joined me on the couch, sliding an arm around my shoulders. "Want me to run you a bath? You look exhausted." The offer was tempting, not the bath itself. I met Raymond Foster at the university alumni fundraiser 8 years ago. He was charming in that effortless way some people have. Attentive, quick with a joke, seemingly interested in everything I had to say. After my mother's death during my junior year of college, I had thrown myself into teaching, finding purpose in helping my students discover the transformative power of literature. Dating had become an afterthought, something I approached with caution rather than enthusiasm, but Raymond was different. He listened when I talked about my favorite novels, remembered details about my students' projects, brought coffee just the way I liked it without being asked. When he spoke about his work as a financial consultant, he focused on helping clients achieve their goals rather than the money involved. I found his apparent value system refreshing. Our courtship progressed rapidly by my standards, though friends assured me it was a normal timeline. After 6 months, he suggested moving in together. At 8 months, he presented me with a key to his condo. By our first anniversary, he proposed at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date, a vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother gleaming in the candlelight. "It's been in my family for generations," he explained as he slid it onto my finger. "My mother has been saving it for the woman I would spend my life with." I should have recognized the significance of this statement, the intertwining of Vivian's approval with our relationship. But at the time, I was touched by the sentiment, by the idea of joining a family legacy after years of feeling unmoored following my mother's death. Vivian Foster was a formidable woman, poised, polished, and particular. She had built a successful event planning business catering to Connecticut's elite, developing connections throughout the state's social and professional circles. Widowed when Raymond was just 7, she had channeled her energy into 2 pursuits: her business and her son. Raymond was all I had left of John, she told me during our first lunch together, her eyes softening momentarily before resuming their usual shrewd assessment. "Everything I've done has been to ensure his future." I admired her strength, her determination to create security for her child as a single mother in the 1980s. My own mother had shown similar resilience after my father's business struggles during my childhood. It seemed like a point of connection between us. The wedding planning revealed the first significant cracks in this perception. What began as Vivian offering suggestions quickly evolved into her controlling nearly every aspect of the event. The venue I had mentioned liking was charming but impractical. The simple, literary-themed centerpieces I envisioned were clever for a classroom, but not sophisticated enough for a wedding. The guest list expanded to include dozens of people. I'd never met Vivian's clients, business associates, and social connections. "These relationships are important for Raymond's career," she explained, when I expressed concern about the growing size and cost of the wedding. "Networking doesn't stop for personal events. In fact, that's often where the most valuable connections are made." Raymond supported his mother's vision at every turn. "She knows what she's doing," he would say, "and she's covering the additional costs, so why not let her have this?" It seemed reasonable on the surface, a generous offer from a mother to her only son. But looking back, I see it was the first time I compromised my own desires to accommodate the Foster family dynamic. The day itself was objectively beautiful, the historic mansion venue draped in elegant decor, the food exceptional, the string quartet flawless. But it felt more like attending someone else's vision of my wedding than experiencing my own. My father, still sharp and healthy then, noticed my occasional moments of disconnection. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said during our father-daughter dance, "but not entirely present. Is everything as you want it?" I smiled reassuringly. "It's just overwhelming. So many people. He studied me with the perceptiveness that had always made me feel truly seen. Marriage is about compromise. Eliza, but don't compromise yourself away entirely. Your mother and I didn't always want the same things, but we respected each other's essentials. I carried his words with me as Raymond and I settled into married life, trying to identify my essentials and hold firm to them. My career was I loved teaching and declined Raymond's suggestion that I consider administration roles that paid better but would take me out of the classroom. My relationship with my father was another. I prioritized weekly dinners with him despite Raymond's frequent work commitments that prevented him from joining us. For the most part, our early marriage was harmonious. We bought a charming craftsman-style house halfway between my school and Raymond's office, spent weekends exploring local hiking trails or attending community events, and developed friendships with other couples our age. Vivian's influence, while still present through regular Sunday dinners and holiday expectations, seemed to have receded to a manageable level. When my father began showing signs of cognitive decline, forgetting appointments, telling the same story multiple times in one conversation, becoming momentarily disoriented while driving, Raymond was supportive in practical ways. He researched Alzheimer's symptoms and treatments, connected me with a colleague whose mother had received excellent care at a memory clinic in Boston, and adjusted our budget to accommodate the increasing medical expenses. But he rarely accompanied me on visits to neurologists or care facilities, citing work obligations that in retrospect seemed suspiciously frequent. When I expressed worry or grief over my father's deterioration, Raymond offered solutions rather than emotional support. Hiring a part-time caregiver, researching medications, suggesting support groups. All useful, certainly, but missing the comfort of simply being present with the difficulty. "You're so capable, Eliza," he would say admiringly when I managed doctor's appointments, medication schedules, and home safety modifications while teaching full-time. "I don't know how you do it all." I mistook this for appreciation rather than recognizing it as permission to carry these burdens alone. Capability became my armor, the quality that defined me in our marriage. Raymond handled our investments and long-term financial planning. I managed the day-to-day logistics of our lives and my father's care. We operated as efficient partners rather than emotional companions. This dynamic might have continued indefinitely if not for my father's accelerating condition and the subsequent revelations. Looking back, I wonder if Raymond and Vivian had always viewed my father's estate as part of their long-term financial strategy, a calculation made when Raymond first learned about my background and family situation. The thought sickened me as I sat in our tastefully decorated living room the evening after my father's hospital visit, watching Raymond clear the dinner dishes with practiced domestic efficiency. Was our entire marriage built on a foundation of opportunism rather than love? Had every thoughtful gesture, every seeming compromise been part of an elaborate performance designed to position him favorably for this eventual betrayal? "You're miles away," Raymond observed, returning from the kitchen with 2 mugs of herbal tea. "Still worried about your dad?" "Among other things," I replied vaguely, accepting the tea with a nod of thanks. He settled beside me on the couch. "Try not to overthink everything. The doctor said he's fine, physically at least, and Morningside is equipped to handle his condition." He squeezed my shoulder. "Plus, all the legal matters are taken care of. That's one less thing for you to worry about." The audacity of this statement, referring to the fraudulent trust amendments as something helpful, nearly broke my careful composure. I sipped my tea to hide my expression, burning my tongue in the process. "You're right," I managed after a moment. "Everything's being handled." Raymond's phone chimed with a text. He glanced at it, then stood, Mother wants me to stop by and pick up some documents for a client meeting tomorrow. Will you be okay on your own for a bit? The timing was perfect, an opportunity to leave while he was gone. I'll be fine. Actually, I might take that bath you suggested and go to bed early. It's been an exhausting day. Good idea. He bent to kiss my forehead. Don't wait up. I might be a while if Mother needs help with some other things. As soon as his car backed out of our driveway, I sprang into action. I retrieved the suitcase from under our bed, added a few more essential items, and carried it to my car. Then I wrote a brief note. Staying with Andrea for a few days to clear my head. We'll call tomorrow. And left it on the kitchen counter. Not a lie, but not the full truth either. The drive to Andrea's condominium took 15 minutes. We had been friends since our first year teaching together at Oakridge High, finding common ground in our love of literature and dedication to our students. She had been a constant support through my mother's death, my father's diagnosis, and the everyday challenges of the classroom. If there was anyone I could trust completely in this situation, it was Andrea. She opened her door before I could knock, enveloping me in a tight hug. You look terrible, she said frankly, taking my suitcase. Whatever this is, it must be serious. It is, I confirmed, following her inside. I don't even know where to begin. Wine first, then talking, she decided, leading me to her cozy living room, where a bottle was already open, 2 glasses waiting. I figured you might need it. I sank onto her comfortable sofa, suddenly aware of the exhaustion that had been building for days. Raymond and his mother manipulated my father into changing his trust documents while he was cognitively impaired, I said, the entire sordid tale spilling out before Andrea could even pour the wine. Her hand stilled on the bottle. What? They brought some lawyer to see him, convinced him to sign papers, making Raymond the primary beneficiary instead of me. I pulled out my phone. I have it all on recording. My father's voice recorder was in his study, and it captured everything. Andrea listened to the recording, her expression morphing from shock to disgusted anger. That's reprehensible, she said when it finished. Taking advantage of a man with Alzheimer's, your own father-in-law, that's not just unethical, it's evil. I've been living with someone capable of this for 8 years. I said, voice breaking for the first time. How did I not see who he really was? Andrea poured the wine and pressed a glass into my hand. Because he didn't want you to see it. People like that, they're careful to show you only what serves their purposes. She shook her head. What happens now? I explained Mitchell's plan, the legal filings, the service of papers scheduled for tomorrow morning. After that, I don't know. Divorce, obviously. But the rest depends on how Raymond and Vivian respond when they realize they've been caught. You're staying here as long as you need, Andrea said firmly. The guest room is yours, and I'm coming with you to see your father tomorrow. You shouldn't be handling this alone. The genuine support brought tears to my eyes, tears I'd been too shocked and determined to shed until now. Thank you, I whispered. I don't know what I would do without you. You'd figure it out, Andrea said confidently. You're the strongest person I know, Eliza, but you don't have to do it alone. After a light meal and another glass of wine, I retreated to Andrea's guest room. My phone showed 3 missed calls and 5 texts from Raymond, escalating in concern. Where are you? Your car is gone. Just got home, found your note. Why didn't you tell me you were going to Andrea's? Please call me, I'm worried. Eliza, what's going on? This isn't like you. At least let me know you're safe, please. I texted back a brief response. I'm safe. Need some space to think. We'll call tomorrow. His reply was immediate. Think about what? Did something happen? Talk to me. I turned off my phone without responding. Tomorrow would bring enough confrontation. Tonight I needed rest. Sleep came fitfully. My dreams filled with disjointed images. My father signing papers while Vivian loomed over him. Raymond removing family photos from our home and replacing them with strangers' faces. a hospital corridor that stretched endlessly before me. I woke at dawn, feeling scarcely rested, but clearer in my resolve. After a quick shower, I turned my phone back on to find several more messages from Raymond, alternating between concern and frustration. The most recent, sent at 5:48 a.m., read, simply, "Mother received legal papers this morning. Call me immediately." So service had been accomplished even earlier than planned. I texted Mitchell, "They've been served. What now?" His response was prompt, "Come to the office at 10 a.m. Bring the original recording device and any other evidence." I showed Andrea the exchange over coffee. "They moved fast," she observed. "Probably better that way. Less time for them to cover their tracks or pressure your father further." "I should check on Dad," I said, suddenly anxious about how Raymond and Vivian might react. What if they try to see him, to manipulate him again? "Let's go now," Andrea suggested, "before your meeting with Mitchell." Morningside Gardens was quiet when we arrived at 8:30 a.m., the residents still at breakfast in the dining room. The receptionist recognized me and waved us through to the memory care unit where my father's apartment was located. I found him seated, in his favorite chair by the window, dressed neatly in a button-down shirt and cardigan, gazing out at the flowering courtyard. He turned as we entered, a flicker of recognition warming his features. "Lizzie," he said, using my childhood nickname, "you've brought a friend. This is Andrea, Dad. She teaches English with me." I kissed his cheek, noting with relief that the cut on his forehead from yesterday's fall was already healing well. "How are you feeling today?" "Right as rain," he replied with a touch of his old heartiness, "though they won't let me walk without an escort now. Apparently I'm a falling risk." He said this with mild indignation, a glimpse of his former self. "Just a precaution," I assured him, sitting beside his chair. "Did you have any visitors this morning?" I tried to keep my tone casual, not wanting to alarm him. He considered the question. "The nurse came, and the young man with the breakfast cart." He paused, brow furrowing slightly. "Was someone else supposed to come?" "No, Dad. I was just wondering." Relief washed through me. Raymond and Vivian hadn't attempted to see him yet. We spent a pleasant hour with my father. It was one of his better days cognitively. He recalled Andrea from previous visits, asked appropriate questions about the school year, and even remembered that his favorite gardening program would be on television later that morning. The normalcy was bittersweet. These increasingly rare windows of lucidity made more precious by their impermanence. As we prepared to leave, a staff member approached with a tablet. "Ms. Keller, there's been an update to your father's approved visitors list. I wanted to confirm it with you." My stomach tightened. "What update?" She turned the tablet toward me. "Mr. and Mrs. Foster have been removed as approved visitors. The change was processed through our online portal this morning." She looked uncertain. "I thought you might have done it, but the system shows it was authorized by—" She checked the screen again. "Mitchell Granger listed as Mr. Keller's legal representative." Mitchell had acted swiftly to protect my father, a precaution I hadn't even thought to request. "Yes, that's correct," I confirmed. "Mitchell Granger is my father's attorney and has legal authority regarding his care." The staff member nodded, clearly relieved that the change was legitimate. "I'll make a note in our system. Thank you for confirming." As Andrea and I walked back to the car, I checked my phone to find a new text from Raymond. "What have you done?" "Mother was served papers about James' trust this morning, and now the care facility says we're removed from the visitor list. Call me now." "He's furious," I said to Andrea, showing her the message. "Of course he is," she replied. "People like that always react with anger when their schemes are exposed. Are you going to call him?" I considered this as we got into the car. No, any conversation should happen with lawyers present. He lost the right to private explanations when he defrauded my father. Mitchell's office was located in a converted Victorian house in West Hartford, its dignified exterior reflecting his traditional approach to legal practice. His assistant showed us directly to his private office, where Mitchell waited with Catherine Edwards, a younger attorney he had brought in to assist with the case. "Thank you for coming in," Mitchell greeted me, shaking hands with both Andrea and me. "I thought you might want an update on where things stand." "Yes, please," I said, settling into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "I see you've already had Raymond and Vivian removed from my father's visitor list." Mitchell nodded. "A necessary precaution. We've also filed for a temporary restraining order preventing them from contacting your father in any way. Judge Hernandez granted it this morning." Relief washed through me. "Thank you. I hadn't even thought about that possibility." "Unfortunately, we have to consider worst-case scenarios in these situations," Mitchell said gravely. "People who have demonstrated a willingness to exploit vulnerability rarely stop at one attempt." Catherine opened a folder on the desk. "The petition to invalidate the amended trust documents has been filed, with supporting evidence including your father's medical records documenting his Alzheimer's diagnosis and cognitive assessments. We've also included affidavits from his primary physician and neurologist confirming his lack of capacity to make complex financial decisions at the time the documents were signed." "What about the recording?" I asked, placing my father's voice. "Recorder on the desk. That's our strongest evidence," Mitchell confirmed. "With your permission, we'd like to have the original device secured in the court's evidence room after making authenticated copies." I nodded my agreement. "Of course. What has been Raymond's legal response so far?" "His attorney called approximately 40 minutes ago," Mitchell said. "Gerald Winters. I know him well, aggressive but generally ethical. He's requesting a meeting between all parties before proceeding further with the case." "Is that standard?" I asked suspiciously. "In situations like this, yes. They'll want to assess our evidence and potentially discuss settlement options before this becomes a matter of public record through court proceedings." Mitchell leaned forward. "You should be prepared for them to offer significant concessions. To keep this quiet." "I don't want their money," I said firmly. "I want my father's wishes respected and his assets protected for his care." Mitchell smiled slightly. "That's precisely the position we'll maintain. However, there's another matter we need to discuss." He glanced at Catherine, who pulled another document from her folder. "We've prepared divorce papers," she explained, sliding them toward me. "Given the circumstances, we believe filing for divorce concurrently with the trust litigation makes strategic sense. It prevents Raymond from making claims on your personal assets or attempting to leverage your marriage during the trust dispute." I stared at the documents, the clinical legal terminology reducing 8 years of marriage to a series of provisions, conditions, and dissolutions. Despite knowing it was necessary, seeing it in black and white made the reality of my situation crash down on me with new force. "The ground cited a fraud and misrepresentation," Catherine continued gently, "essentially arguing that Raymond entered the marriage under false pretenses with the ultimate goal of financial gain through your family's assets." "Is that difficult to prove?" Andrea asked, placing a supportive hand on my arm. "In conjunction with the trust case, no," Mitchell replied. "The recording and their actions regarding James's trust provide compelling evidence of Raymond's true character and intentions. Connecticut is a no-fault divorce state, so Eliza could simply cite irreconcilable differences, but the fraud claim strengthens her position regarding asset division." I took a deep breath. "What do I need to do?" "Review and sign these papers," Catherine said. "We'll file them immediately. After that, maintain minimal contact with Raymond and only in writing or with witnesses present. Document any attempts he makes to contact you or your father. As I signed the divorce petition, my phone buzzed with yet another text from Raymond. "Mother and I are meeting with our attorney at 2 p.m. This misunderstanding could be resolved if you would just talk to me. Please be reasonable, Eliza." I showed the message to Mitchell, who shook his head. Classic manipulation, framing deliberate fraud as a misunderstanding and suggesting you're being unreasonable for protecting your father's interests. "Should I respond?" I asked. "Only to direct all communication to go through me," Mitchell advised, writing his office number on a business card and handing it to me. A simple text: "Please direct all communication regarding legal matters to my attorney, Mitchell Granger," followed by this number, nothing more. I sent the message as directed, then turned off my phone. What happens next? "We wait for their response to our filings," Mitchell explained. "They'll likely request access to your father to have their own expert evaluate his cognitive capacity." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "We'll fight any such request," Mitchell assured me. "Your father's documented medical history and the recording should be sufficient evidence, but be prepared for aggressive tactics. People caught in fraud rarely surrender quietly." As we left Mitchell's office, I felt simultaneously drained and fortified. The legal machinery was now in motion, with professional advocates fighting for my father's rights and protection. But the personal battle facing Raymond's betrayal, dismantling our shared life, rebuilding my sense of trust and security, was just beginning. "Lunch," Andrea suggested as we reached her car. "You need to eat something." I nodded, realizing I hadn't had anything but coffee since waking. "Something simple. I don't think I could manage a real restaurant right now." We found a quiet cafe with outdoor seating, ordering sandwiches and iced tea. The sunshine and gentle spring breeze felt incongruous with the turmoil of my life, yet somehow restorative. As we ate, Andrea carefully steered our conversation toward practical matters. "You should stay with me at least through the weekend," she said. "Then we can reassess. You'll need to get more of your things from the house eventually." Mitchell advised waiting until Raymond has been served with the divorce papers and a formal property inventory has been filed, I explained, to prevent him from hiding or removing valuable items. Andrea nodded. "Smart. What about your classes? Do you want to take some personal leave?" I considered this. The spring semester had only 3 weeks remaining before final exams. "I think teaching would actually help keep me grounded," I decided. "Focusing on the students, on literature. It might be the only normal part of my life right now." "I understand that," Andrea said, "but don't push yourself too hard. The department will support whatever you need." My phone chimed with an email notification, the only alert I'd left active after silencing calls and texts. It was from Mitchell. "Meeting with opposing counsel scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please be available by phone in case we need to consult you during negotiations." I showed Andrea the message. That was fast. "They're scrambling," she observed. "Your evidence must be even more damning than they initially realized." As we finished our lunch, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The shock and betrayal remained painful, but alongside them grew something unexpected, a clearer understanding of my own strength and resilience. My father had raised me to face challenges directly, to act with integrity, even when others didn't. Now, protecting his legacy meant honoring those lessons. "You know what's strange?" I said to Andrea as we walked back to her car. "Part of me feels more certain, more centered than I have in years, like I've been living in a subtle fog without realizing it, and now, despite everything, I can see clearly." Andrea smiled. "That's what happens when you stop accommodating dishonesty. Even when the truth is painful, there's freedom in facing it." That afternoon, I returned to my classroom at Oakridge High to prepare materials for the following week's lessons. The familiar environment, bookshelves filled with classic novels and contemporary works, student essays waiting to be graded, inspirational quotes pinned to the bulletin board, provided a sanctuary of normalcy amid the chaos of my personal life. As I updated lesson plans and organized handouts, I reflected on the countless discussions I'd led about literary characters facing moral dilemmas, making difficult choices, rebuilding after betrayal. I had always encouraged my students to find personal meaning in these stories, to recognize how literature illuminates the human experience. Now I found myself drawing strength from the very texts I taught, finding echoes of my own situation in characters who discovered their resilience, precisely when tested most severely. When I finally packed up to leave, I noticed a small plaque on my desk, a gift from a former student. "In a gentle way, you can shake the world." Gandhi's words reminded me that standing firmly for truth and justice needn't mean losing one's compassion or principle. Even as I fought Raymond and Vivian's deception, I could do so with dignity rather than vengeance, with purpose rather than bitterness. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional reckonings. But with each step I took to protect my father and reclaim my future, I was already becoming someone stronger than I had been before, someone who could face betrayal without being defined by it, who could rebuild with greater wisdom and authenticity than before. As I drove back to Andrea's condominium, I realized that Raymond and Vivian had unknowingly given me something valuable amid their betrayal. The opportunity to discover just how much I could withstand and how much more I deserved. The conference room at Mitchell's law office felt unnaturally quiet despite the 7 people seated around the polished mahogany table. On one side sat Mitchell, Catherine, and myself. Across from us were Raymond, Vivian, and their attorney, Gerald Winters, a silver-haired man with expensive cufflinks and a practiced neutral expression. A court reporter positioned at the end of the table was the only person making any sound, her fingers moving steadily over her stenotype machine. Raymond had attempted to catch my eye several times since entering the room, his expression cycling between concern, confusion, and flashes of anger. I kept my gaze fixed on my legal pad, taking unnecessary notes to avoid meeting his glance. Vivian, by contrast, hadn't looked in my direction once, her posture rigid and her attention focused entirely on Gerald Winters as he arranged documents before him. "Thank you all for agreeing to this meeting," Winters began, his tone professionally cordial. "I believe we have an opportunity to resolve these matters efficiently and discreetly, which would benefit everyone involved." Mitchell nodded slightly. "We're willing to listen to your proposal, though I should note that my client's position remains firm regarding the invalidation of the fraudulently obtained trust amendments." Winters smiled thinly. "Let's avoid characterizations like fraudulent. At this stage, we have a difference of interpretation regarding Mr. Keller's intentions and capacity." "We have more than interpretation," Mitchell replied evenly. "We have medical documentation of Mr. Keller's cognitive impairment and recorded evidence of manipulation." At the mention of the recording, Raymond shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vivian's expression remained impassive, though her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her leather portfolio. "We've reviewed the materials you provided," Winters acknowledged, "and while there may be some procedural irregularities in how the trust amendments were executed, my clients maintain that they were acting in accordance with James Keller's wishes during a complex family situation." I couldn't contain my disbelief. "Procedural irregularities? They manipulated my cognitively impaired father while I was unaware. The recording captures them explicitly lying to him about my knowledge and approval." Mitchell placed a gentle hand on my arm, a reminder of our agreed strategy to let him handle the negotiations. I took a deep breath and nodded slightly in apology. The recording certainly contains statements that require explanation, Winters conceded. However, context is important. My clients were attempting to ensure Mr. Keller's estate would be properly managed during a difficult time, with Mrs. Foster's teaching responsibilities limiting her availability. By removing her as a primary beneficiary, Catherine asked sharply, that seems an unusual approach to helping someone. For the first time, Raymond spoke directly. Eliza, this has all been a terrible misunderstanding. We were trying to protect your father's assets, to make sure everything was properly structured for his care. Mother knows people in estate planning who recommended these changes. We should have discussed it with you first. That was our mistake. The practiced sincerity in his voice, a tone I had heard countless times during our marriage when he was trying to persuade me of something, now rang hollow and manipulative. 8 years of trust collapsed under the weight of this new perspective, like viewing a familiar photograph suddenly revealed as a skillful forgery. A mistake? I repeated, unable to maintain my silence. You deliberately waited until I was dealing with my father's health crisis, then used his confusion to redirect his estate to yourself. The recording makes your intentions perfectly clear. Vivian finally turned to face me, her expression a masterpiece of wounded dignity. We have only ever wanted what's best for this family, Eliza. Raymond has supported your teaching career despite its financial limitations. He stood by you through your father's decline. Perhaps in our eagerness to secure everyone's future, we moved too quickly, but our intentions were honorable. The audacity of her statement, recasting their exploitation as generosity, made my hands tremble with suppressed anger. I clasped them tightly in my lap as Mitchell intervened. Intentions aside, the actions taken were improper both legally and ethically, he stated firmly. The amendments were executed without proper capacity, without proper disclosure, and with active misrepresentation. They cannot stand. Winters leaned forward. In the interest of family harmony and avoiding protracted litigation, my clients are prepared to make a generous offer. He slid a document across the table. A full restoration of the original trust provisions regarding Ms. Keller's beneficiary status, plus a separate financial settlement to acknowledge the distress this situation has caused. Mitchell reviewed the document briefly before passing it to me. The proposed settlement would indeed restore my position as my father's primary beneficiary after his care expenses, but also included a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from discussing the circumstances with anyone, including potential divorce proceedings. And regarding the divorce petition, Mitchell asked, returning the document to Winters. My clients hope that won't be necessary, Winters replied smoothly. Marriages encounter difficulties, misunderstandings occur. With the trust matter resolved, perhaps Mr. and Mrs. Foster could pursue counseling rather than dissolution. Raymond leaned toward me, his expression earnest. Eliza, please. 8 years of marriage shouldn't end over one mistake. We can work through this. I met his gaze directly for the first time. This wasn't one mistake, Raymond. This was a calculated betrayal of my father and me. How can there be any trust after that? People make poor choices under pressure, he argued. I was worried about your father's care costs, depleting everything, leaving nothing for our future. It was wrong, I see that now. But it came from a place of concern, not malice. The conference room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. These were the justifications of someone who still believed he could manipulate me back into compliance, who thought my boundaries could be negotiated away with the right combination of rationalizations and emotional appeals. Mitchell, I said, quietly, I need a moment. Of course, he replied. "Let's take a 15-minute recess." Outside in the hallway, I paced the length of the corridor, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. Catherine joined me, offering a bottle of water. "You're doing well in there," she said. "It's not easy facing manipulative people directly." I took a long drink. They're still trying to control the narrative, to make it seem like I'm overreacting to a minor indiscretion rather than responding to a fundamental betrayal. Catherine nodded. "That's their only viable strategy. If they can minimize what happened, frame it as a miscommunication rather than fraud, they hope to limit both the legal and personal consequences. The settlement offer restores my beneficiary status, but the non-disclosure requirement is telling," I observed. "They're more concerned about their reputations than about making actual amends." "Exactly," Catherine agreed. "And the suggestion that you should reconsider the divorce is particularly manipulative. They're hoping your desire to protect your father's interests will make you compromise on your own well-being." I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted by the emotional labor of this confrontation. "I won't do that. I can't go back to a marriage built on such fundamental dishonesty." "You shouldn't have to," Catherine said firmly. "And the trust issue can be resolved without sacrificing your right to end the marriage. These are separate matters legally, even if they're trying to connect them." When we returned to the conference room, my resolve had solidified into something unshakable. Mitchell looked to me questioningly, and I gave him a slight nod to proceed, as we had discussed before the meeting. "We've considered your offer," Mitchell began, "and while we appreciate the willingness to restore Ms. Keller's beneficiary status, the proposed terms are unacceptable. We will accept nothing less than a complete invalidation of the fraudulent amendments, a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and the resignation of Raymond Foster as co-trustee. The non-disclosure provisions are rejected entirely." Winters frowned. "That's a significant departure from our proposal. Your proposal attempts to conceal misconduct rather than remedy it," Mitchell replied. "Furthermore, the divorce proceedings will continue regardless of the resolution of the trust matter. These are separate legal issues." Raymond's facade of contrition cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're throwing away our marriage over a misunderstanding about your father's estate, an estate you'll inherit eventually anyway." "This was never about inheritance," I said quietly but firmly. "This was about respecting my father's wishes and autonomy. This was about honesty and trust in our marriage. You and your mother deliberately deceived a vulnerable man and betrayed my trust. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a revelation of character." Vivian's composure finally slipped. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Eliza. Raymond has provided you with a comfortable life while you pursued a teaching career that barely covers the cost of your book collection. Now you're willing to destroy this family over some legal technicalities." "Mother," Raymond cautioned, but she continued, "let's be honest about what's happening here. You've decided you don't need Raymond anymore now that your father's money is on the line. You're the one being calculating." Mitchell intervened before I could respond. "These personal attacks are counterproductive and inappropriate, Mrs. Foster. We're here to discuss legal remedies for documented fraud, not to engage in character assassination." Winters placed a restraining hand on Vivian's arm. "Let's refocus on the legal matters at hand. What specific terms would make the settlement acceptable to your client, Mr. Granger?" The next hour was consumed with detailed negotiations over the precise wording of the settlement agreement. Mitchell artfully separated the trust matter from the divorce proceedings, making it clear that while we were willing to resolve the former amicably, the latter would proceed regardless. By the time the meeting concluded, we had a framework agreement. The trust amendments would be formally invalidated, Raymond would resign as co-trustee, and Mitchell would be appointed as the independent trustee to oversee my father's affairs. As we prepared to leave, Raymond made one final attempt. Eliza, can we talk privately, just for a few minutes? I hesitated, then nodded. Mitchell raised an eyebrow questioningly, but I assured him with a glance that I could handle this. Raymond and I moved to a small seating area at the end of the hallway, far enough from the others for privacy, but still within sight of Mitchell and Catherine. "I know you're hurt and angry," Raymond began, his voice low and urgent. "But 8 years together has to count for something. We built a life." "We did," I acknowledged. "But now I understand it was built on shaky foundations. You've been positioning yourself from the beginning, haven't you? Waiting for the right moment to secure your claim on my father's estate." "That's not fair," he protested. "I married you because I loved you. Yes, I was aware your family had some assets, but that wasn't my primary motivation." "Just a convenient bonus?" I suggested, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Raymond ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're twisting everything. Financial security matters in a marriage. Your father's condition was deteriorating. Decisions needed to be made. We should have included you, but you've been so stressed with teaching and caregiving that we thought that you'd handle it for me," I finished. "By removing me as beneficiary and installing yourself. That's not help, Raymond. That's exploitation." He leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "What do you want from me, Eliza? A full confession? Fine. Yes, Mother and I went too far. Yes, we should have been transparent. But the reality is, your father's care could cost hundreds of thousands before he passes. The house would likely need to be sold. The investments liquidated. I was trying to ensure we had something left for our future." "Our future," I repeated. "Not my father's comfort or my peace of mind. Not honoring his wishes for his own assets. Your priority was securing your peace." Raymond's expression hardened. "You've always been naive about financial realities. Someone had to think practically." And there it was, the condescension that had always lurked beneath his supportive facade, the belief that his judgment superseded mine, that his priorities were inherently more valid. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity how Raymond had viewed me throughout our marriage, not as an equal partner, but as someone to be managed and directed toward his objectives. "I think we've said everything necessary," I said, rising from my seat. "The attorneys can handle the details from here." Raymond caught my wrist as I turned to leave. "Don't do this, Eliza. You're making a mistake that will cost us both." I gently but firmly removed his hand. "No, Raymond. I'm finally correcting one." The aftermath of that meeting unfolded with surprising swiftness. Within a week, the formal settlement was signed. The fraudulent trust amendments were invalidated. Raymond resigned as co-trustee, and Mitchell was appointed to oversee the trust's administration. The divorce proceedings continued separately, with an initial hearing scheduled for the following month. Raymond moved out of our house, taking only personal items and leaving me with a property that suddenly felt both emptier and more peaceful. Vivian made no further attempts to contact me, though I heard through Andrea that she had been actively spreading her version of events among our mutual acquaintances, casting me as an ungrateful wife who had turned against Raymond when he tried to help manage my father's affairs. These attempts at character assassination might have bothered me more if I hadn't been so focused on rebuilding my life and ensuring my father's care. The school year was ending, giving me the summer to process everything that had happened and plan my next steps. Principal Bernard, when I explained the situation, was supportive and discreet, offering me continued flexibility with my schedule if needed for legal matters. "Your dedication to your students through all this has been remarkable," he told me during our end-of-year conference. "Take the summer to focus on your father and yourself. The classroom will be here in September." 2 weeks after school ended, I received an unexpected call from Jeffrey Pearson, the attorney Vivian had originally brought to facilitate the fraudulent trust amendments. "Ms. Keller, I hope you'll forgive this intrusion, he began hesitantly. I've been following the proceedings regarding your father's trust, and I feel compelled to speak with you directly. My guard immediately went up. Any communication should go through my attorney, Mr. Granger. I understand, Pearson replied quickly, and I've already reached out to him to schedule a formal meeting, but I wanted to speak with you personally, first as a matter of conscience. Something in his tone, a genuine discomfort rather than the smooth persuasiveness I'd come to expect from Raymond and Vivian's circle, made me pause. I'm listening. When Mrs. Foster engaged my services, she represented the situation very differently than what I now understand to be true, Pearson explained. I was told that your father had expressed wishes to include his son-in-law in the trust management to reduce your burden, and that you were aware of and supportive of these changes, but too busy to attend the meeting. And you believed that, without verifying? I asked skeptically. I did request verification of Mr. Keller's capacity, he countered. Mrs. Foster provided a letter, supposedly from his primary physician, stating he was experiencing mild memory issues, but remained competent. For financial decisions, I've since learned that letter was misrepresented, if not outright falsified. I took a deep breath, processing this new information. Why are you telling me this now? Because I believe I was used as an instrument in something unethical, possibly illegal, Pearson said, his voice tightening. When I heard the recording that was submitted in evidence, I had no idea your father was in that condition during our meeting. No idea you were completely unaware of what was happening. I've built my practice on ethical representation, Ms. Keller. This situation has been distressing, to say the least. I appreciate your candor, I said cautiously, but I'm not sure what you expect from me. Nothing, he replied. I simply wanted you to know that not everyone involved was acting with ill intent. I've already provided Mr. Granger with a sworn affidavit regarding my interactions with Mrs. Foster and what I was told. If this matter proceeds to court, I'm prepared to testify about how I was misled. After thanking him for his call, I immediately contacted Mitchell to confirm Pearson's claims. Mitchell verified that they had indeed received an affidavit that strengthened our case considerably by documenting Vivian's deliberate misrepresentations to the attorney she had engaged. This could be very helpful if Raymond decides to contest the divorce or the financial settlements, Mitchell explained. It establishes a pattern of deception that extends beyond the immediate trust issue. The knowledge that at least one person in the tangled web had chosen integrity over self-protection offered a small measure of reassurance in a situation where I had been forced to question my judgment about everyone I thought I knew. Pearson's honesty, however belated, was refreshing. That evening, I visited my father at Morningside Gardens. It was one of his more lucid days, and he recognized me immediately when I entered his apartment. "Lizzie," he smiled, reaching for my hand, "you look different today, lighter somehow." I sat beside him, wondering how to explain the complex legal and personal developments of recent weeks in terms he could understand without causing distress. But before I could formulate an approach, he continued, "Did you fix the problem with the papers? The ones Raymond and that woman wanted me to sign?" I stared at him in surprise. "You remember that?" He nodded slowly. "Not all of it. But I knew something wasn't right. They kept saying you knew about it, but it didn't feel true." He tapped his chest. "In here it didn't feel true." Tears welled in my eyes at this evidence that some essential part of my father, his moral compass, his connection to me, had remained intact despite his cognitive decline. "Yes, Dad, we fixed it. Everything's back the way you wanted it." "Good," he said simply. "I always taught you to stand up for what's right, didn't I? Even when it's hard." "You did," I confirmed, squeezing his hand. every day by example. We spent the rest of the visit in companionable conversation, talking about the birds visiting the feeder outside his window, the book he was currently listening to on audio, the garden club he had joined at Morningside. His memory skipped and jumped, but his essence, his kindness, his quiet dignity, his subtle humor, remained vibrantly present. As I prepared to leave, he caught my hand again. "Are you happy, Lizzie? That's what matters to me." The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? In the midst of divorce, legal battles, and the ongoing grief of watching my father's mind gradually slip away. "I'm getting there, Dad," I answered honestly. "I'm finding my way back to myself." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Good. That's the real inheritance, you know, not houses or money, knowing who you are, standing in your truth." His words stayed with me as I drove back to the house that evening, a house that had once been ours, but was gradually becoming simply mine, as I rearranged furniture, replaced photos, and reclaimed spaces that had been compromised by Raymond's presence. The process of physical transformation mirrored my internal one, removing what no longer served me, rediscovering forgotten aspects of myself, creating room for new possibilities. The following week brought an unexpected development in the divorce proceedings. Raymond's attorney contacted Mitchell with a proposal. Raymond would agree to an uncontested divorce with a clean financial separation if I would agree not to pursue any claims related to emotional distress or intentional tort based on the trust manipulation. "He's worried about his professional reputation," Mitchell explained when we discussed the offer. "A messy divorce with allegations of elder exploitation could damage his standing with clients. So he's finally prioritizing self-preservation over trying to reconcile," I observed. "It appears so," Mitchell agreed. "From a practical standpoint, this offer has advantages. An uncontested divorce would proceed much more quickly and with significantly less expense and emotional strain." I considered this. The prospect of a protracted legal battle with Raymond held no appeal, especially when my primary goal, protecting my father's trust, had already been achieved. What would further conflict accomplish except to keep me tethered to a painful chapter I was ready to close? "Let's accept the offer with one condition," I decided. "I want full ownership of the house. Raymond can keep his retirement accounts and investments as outlined, but I want the property outright." Mitchell made notes. "That's reasonable given the circumstances. The house has significant equity, but he may prefer a clean break to further negotiations." My intuition proved correct. Raymond accepted the modified terms within 24 hours. The house would be mine. He would retain his personal investments and retirement accounts. All joint accounts would be divided equally. No further claims would be pursued by either party regarding the trust situation or the marriage dissolution. When Mitchell called with the news, I felt a strange sense of anticlimactic relief. After weeks of high emotional intensity and legal maneuvering, the resolution seemed almost too simple, too clean. "Is that it?" I asked. "It just ends like this, with paperwork and signatures?" Mitchell's voice held understanding. "The legal aspects, yes. The emotional processing will follow its own timeline, but at least you can move forward without the burden of ongoing litigation." That evening I walked through the house, my house now, taking inventory of what remained and what I wanted to change. The study where Raymond had set up his home office felt particularly charged with his lingering presence. His desk had been removed, but the built-in bookshelves still held volumes on financial planning and investment strategies. The walls still displayed his university diplomas and professional certifications. On impulse, I began removing the books, boxing them to return to Raymond, As I worked, I considered what I might put in their place, perhaps my collection of classic literature that had previously been restricted to my classroom due to limited space in our shared areas. The wall space might display artwork that reflected my aesthetic rather than the corporate motivational prints Raymond had preferred. I was halfway through emptying the second bookshelf when a slim volume caught my attention. Not one of Raymond's financial texts, but a small leather-bound book with no title on the spine. Curious, I pulled it out and opened to the first page. In Vivian's precise handwriting was the heading Foster Family Legacy Planning, and a date from 12 years ago, nearly 4 years before I had even met Raymond. The contents made my blood run cold. The book was essentially a strategic plan for the Foster family finances, with detailed notes on how to identify and cultivate relationships with individuals who could enhance their financial position. There were bullet-pointed qualities to look for in potential marriage partners, including family assets, inheritance potential, and financial naivety. Several pages in, I found a section labeled Keller Opportunity, dated approximately 9 months after Raymond and I had begun dating. It included detailed notes on my father's property, estimated value of his architectural practice before retirement, and potential inheritance value. A timeline sketched out optimum points for engagement, marriage, and asset integration. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, finding clinical assessments of my personality, idealistically focused on teaching, minimal financial awareness, strong family loyalty can be leveraged. My father's health, excellent currently, no immediate concerns, monitor for age-related conditions, and strategic approaches for Vivian to build affinity with me despite philosophical differences. The most recent entries, dated just after my father's Alzheimer's diagnosis, contained a significantly accelerated timeline labeled Contingency Plan, with strategies for securing trust position and mitigating Eliza's control. The final page included a handwritten note, "Are hesitant about amended approach, emphasized greater share ultimately benefits both. Must act before deterioration becomes legally problematic." I sat on the floor among the scattered books, this physical evidence of years of calculated manipulation in my hands. The shock was followed by a wave of nausea, then an unexpected calm. This wasn't just confirmation of what I already knew, it was liberation from any lingering doubt or guilt about ending my marriage. I had not been paranoid or overly harsh in my judgment. If anything, I had underestimated the extent and duration of their deception. My marriage had never been what I believed it to be. Raymond had approached our relationship as a strategic acquisition, guided by his mother's cold assessment of my value as a connection to my father's assets. After photographing every page of the book, I called Mitchell despite the late hour. "I've found something you need to see," I told him, describing the document. "Does this change our legal position?" Mitchell was silent for a moment after I described the contents. "It certainly could," he finally replied. "This suggests premeditation and a pattern of calculated behavior rather than an impulsive mistake during a stressful time. It could potentially open the door to punitive damages in a civil case, or even criminal charges of conspiracy to commit fraud or elder exploitation." "That's not necessarily what I want," I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. "I don't need to destroy them. I just needed to understand what really happened." "The choice is yours," Mitchell assured me, "but having this evidence strengthens your position regardless of how you choose to use it. Would you like to come by the office tomorrow to discuss options?" The next morning, I brought the book to Mitchell's office, where he and Catherine reviewed it with increasing concern. "This is extraordinarily damning," Catherine observed, carefully turning the pages with a pen to preserve potential fingerprint evidence. If you were inclined to pursue punitive measures, this document provides compelling grounds. I considered this possibility, picturing Raymond and Vivian facing public exposure, perhaps even criminal charges. There would be a certain justice in that outcome, a formal acknowledgement of the wrong they had committed. But as I weighed this option, I thought of my father's words during our recent visit. Knowing who you are, standing in your truth. What would pursuing maximum punishment say about who I was becoming through this experience? Would it represent standing in my truth or being pulled off center by a desire for retribution? I don't want to pursue criminal charges, I decided, but I do want to use this to ensure they never attempt anything similar with my father again. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps a modified settlement agreement. We inform them of this evidence and its implications, but offer to keep it private in exchange for enhanced protections for your father and a more favorable financial settlement in the divorce. The approach felt right, using the leverage not for vengeance, but for protection and fair resolution. Yes, that's what I want to do. When Raymond was informed about the discovered document, his response was immediate and uncharacteristically straightforward. He agreed to all proposed terms without negotiation, including transferring his portion of our retirement savings to me and covering my legal fees for both the trust and divorce proceedings. Vivian, according to Winters, was indisposed and unable to participate in the discussions. Raymond offered no defense or explanation for the strategic planning book, requesting only that it be returned to him after the settlement was finalized, and acknowledged that copies had been securely stored as insurance against future interference. The divorce was finalized 3 months later, a remarkably quick resolution for a process that often drags on for a year or more. As I signed the final paperwork in Mitchell's office, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for what I had believed my marriage to be, relief at having escaped further manipulation, apprehension about the path ahead, and underneath it all, a growing confidence in my ability to navigate life's challenges with integrity and resilience. "How do you feel?" Mitchell asked as I set down the pen after the last signature. "Like I'm closing one chapter and opening another," I replied, grateful for what I've learned but ready to move forward. He smiled, the expression softening, his usually formal demeanor. "Your father would be proud of how you've handled this whole situation, standing firmly for what's right without allowing bitterness to define you. That takes remarkable strength of character." As I drove home to my home, reclaimed and redefined, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. The betrayal had been painful beyond measure, but through it I had discovered capacities within myself I might never have recognized otherwise. The ability to face difficult truths without flinching, to make difficult decisions without wavering, to protect what mattered without becoming hardened in the process. My father's condition would continue to progress. That reality remained unchanged. But now the structures surrounding his care were secure, protected by legal safeguards and overseen by people of genuine integrity. And I had emerged from the crisis not diminished, but expanded, with a clearer understanding of my own values and a deeper trust in my own judgment. The voice recorder that had captured the pivotal conversation now sat in a box in my closet, a reminder that sometimes the truth reveals itself in unexpected ways, and that the courage to listen to that truth, however painful, is the first step toward authentic freedom. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed new buds forming on the dogwood tree in the front yard, the one my father had helped me plant the spring after Raymond and I bought the house. "Something that will grow along with your marriage," he had said then, patting the soil around its slender trunk. The marriage hadn't endured, but the tree was thriving, its branches reaching toward the sky with quiet persistence. And so was I. 3 months after finalizing my divorce from Raymond, I underwent emergency surgery for a ruptured ovarian cyst. The pain had struck suddenly during a department meeting at school, a sharp, twisting sensation that left me breathless and hunched over the conference table. Andrea had driven me to the hospital, stayed while the doctors ran tests, and called Mitchell to inform him of my situation given the ongoing legal complexities with Raymond. "It's not life-threatening," the ER doctor assured me after reviewing my ultrasound. "But you'll need surgery to remove the cyst and control the bleeding. We're preparing an operating room now." Everything happened quickly after that. Signing consent forms, changing into a hospital gown, speaking briefly with the anesthesiologist. As they prepared to wheel me into surgery, I had a sudden, urgent thought. "My father," I said to Andrea, who was standing beside my gurney. "Someone needs to check on him. Make sure Raymond and Vivian don't try to visit him while I'm here." Andrea squeezed my hand. "Already taken care of. Mitchell is sending Catherine to Morningside Gardens as a precaution, and I've alerted the staff about your situation. Nobody, unauthorized, will get near your dad. Just focus on getting through this surgery." The relief must have shown on my face, because the nurse preparing my IV smiled reassuringly. "Sounds like you have good people looking out for you. Now let's get you taken care of." The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took effect was calculating how long it had been since I'd had someone to list as my emergency contact other than Raymond. The thought floated through my mind with surprising lightness, not a lament, but simply an observation as consciousness slipped away. I woke in the recovery room to the steady beeping of monitors and the hushed efficiency of medical staff. The anesthesia fog slowly lifted, leaving behind the dull ache of surgical pain and the disorienting sensation of lost time. "Welcome back," a recovery nurse said, noticing my open eyes. "Everything went well. The surgeon will speak with you once. You're a bit more alert." I nodded, my mouth too dry for speech. The nurse offered ice chips and checked my vital signs, explaining that the laparoscopic procedure had been successful and I would likely be discharged the following day. As full awareness gradually returned, I became conscious of voices in the hallway outside my curtained area, one of them unmistakably Andrea's, her tone uncharacteristically sharp. "Absolutely not. She's just out of surgery and not receiving visitors." Then a male voice I recognized instantly. Raymond. "I'm still listed as her emergency contact. The hospital called me directly." My heart rate spiked, the monitor beside me beeping more rapidly. The recovery nurse glanced at the machine, then at me with concern. "Everything okay?" "My ex-husband is outside," I whispered, voice rough from the breathing tube that had been removed after surgery. "I don't want to see him." She nodded with immediate understanding. "I'll handle this." Before she could move toward the doorway, Andrea appeared through the curtain, her expression a mixture of apology and irritation. "Sorry about this," she said quietly. "Apparently your primary care physician's office still had Raymond listed as your emergency contact. The hospital notification system automatically called him." I closed my eyes briefly, a wave of frustration cutting through the post-surgical haze. Of course, in the chaos of the divorce and legal battles, I had updated so many documents and accounts, but had missed this critical one. "He's insisting on seeing you," Andrea continued. "I told him absolutely not, but he's being persistent. The charge. Nurse is speaking with him now." "I don't want to see him," I repeated, stronger this time. "You won't have to," the recovery nurse assured me, moving toward the hallway. "We take patient preferences very seriously, especially post-surgery." She disappeared through the curtain, and I could hear her professional but firm voice explaining that I was not accepting visitors outside my approved list. Raymond's protests became more insistent, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. I was married to her for 8 years. I have a right to know her condition." Sir, you have no legal right to any patient's information without their consent, came another voice, presumably the charge nurse. If you continue to disrupt the recovery area, I'll have to call security. The thought of this confrontation, unfolding just beyond the thin curtain surrounding my bed, made my already tender abdomen tighten with stress. Andrea noticed my discomfort and took my hand. "Focus on me, not him," she said softly. "He can't get past the nursing staff. I promise." I nodded, trying to regulate my breathing as the surgeon had instructed for post-operative pain management. Outside, the voices grew more distant, suggesting Raymond had been successfully moved away from the recovery area.
The recovery nurse returned a few minutes later. "He's being escorted to the waiting area by security," she confirmed. "And I've updated your visitor restrictions in the system. No one except those you specifically approve will be allowed in." "Thank you," I said, genuinely grateful for this small act of protection when I felt most vulnerable. "Part of the job," she replied with a warm smile. "Now, let's focus on getting you comfortable and stable enough to move to a regular room." By evening, I was settled in a private room on the surgical floor, the pain managed with medication. That left me drowsy, but aware. Andrea had gone home briefly to feed her cat and pick up some essentials for my hospital stay, promising to return with my phone charger and a change of clothes for discharge. During her absence, my surgeon stopped by to explain the procedure and recovery expectations. Dr. Patel was a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor and direct communication style that I appreciated. "The cyst was larger than we anticipated. From the ultrasound," she explained, showing me images on her tablet. "We removed it completely and controlled the bleeding. There should be no long-term complications, though you'll need to follow up in 2 weeks to ensure proper healing." "Thank you," I said, then hesitated before asking, "Was there any indication of why it happened? Could it happen again?" Dr. Patel sat in the visitor chair beside my bed, taking time to address my concerns thoroughly. "Ovarian cysts are relatively common, though ruptures like yours are less so. There's no single cause we can point to, but stress can be a contributing factor. Your body has been through a lot, from what I understand." I raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Your friend mentioned you've had a difficult year. Divorce, legal issues, caring for your father," Dr. Patel clarified. "The body sometimes manifests stress in physical ways, even when we think we're handling it well mentally." The observation hit home. I had been so focused on managing each crisis as it arose, on maintaining my professional responsibilities while navigating the legal and emotional aftermath of Raymond's betrayal, that I had neglected to acknowledge the cumulative toll on my physical health. "I suppose I have been running on adrenaline for months," I admitted. Dr. Patel nodded. "It's common, especially among caregivers and those managing multiple responsibilities. The mind pushes through, but the body keeps score." She made a note in my chart. "I'm recommending some follow-up care that addresses both the physical recovery and stress management. Would you be open to that?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the lack of hesitation. 6 months ago, I might have politely declined, insisting I could handle everything independently, but recent experiences had taught me the value of accepting support when offered. That would be helpful. After Dr. Patel left, a nurse came in to check my vital signs and adjust my pain medication. As she worked, she mentioned casually, "Your ex-husband is still in the waiting area. Hospital policy prevents us from removing him from public areas unless he's causing a disturbance." My stomach tightened again. "Has he tried to come back to my room?" "No," she assured me. "Security made the boundaries very clear. But he did try to get information about your condition from the nurses' station." She shook her head disapprovingly. "We shut that down immediately." I sank back against the pillows, conflicted. Part of me was angry at Raymond's presumption, his disregard for the boundaries established by our divorce. But another part, a quieter, more reflective part, wondered about his motivation for remaining at the hospital despite being firmly rejected. "Did he say why he's staying?" I asked. The nurse adjusted my IV line. "Just that he was concerned and wanted to make sure you were all right." For what it's worth, he seemed genuinely worried, though that doesn't excuse the pushy behavior. I nodded, processing this information. Perhaps Raymond's concern was genuine. We had shared 8 years of our lives, after all. But experience had taught me that his actions often had layers of motivation beyond the apparent. Was he truly worried about my well-being, or concerned about how my condition might affect the finalized divorce agreement? Or was this another manipulation tactic, an attempt to reinsert himself into my life during a moment of vulnerability? The uncertainty itself was exhausting, a reminder of the hypervigilance I'd developed during the final months of our marriage, when every interaction required analysis for hidden agendas. I closed my eyes, suddenly overwhelmed by fatigue. "Try to rest," the nurse advised, dimming the lights. "Your body needs sleep to heal." I must have dozed off because I woke to Andrea's quiet entrance, her arms full with a small duffel bag and a vase of cheerful yellow daisies. "Thought these might brighten things up," she said, placing the flowers on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Better after some sleep," I replied, adjusting the bed to a sitting position. "Though I hear Raymond is still camped out in the waiting room." Andrea rolled her eyes. "Yes, looking appropriately concerned and martyred." I walked past him on my way in. She unpacked the duffel, setting my toiletries and a change of comfortable clothes in the small closet. "Want me to tell him to leave? I'm happy to play the bad guy." I considered the offer. The simplest solution would be to have Raymond removed from the situation entirely. But something held me back, perhaps a curiosity about what he hoped to accomplish with this vigil, or maybe a growing recognition that I no longer feared confronting him directly. "Actually," I said slowly, "I think I want to speak with him briefly." Andrea looked surprised. "Are you sure? You're just out of surgery. You don't owe him anything." "I know," I assured her, "but there's something unfinished about this situation. I think I need to address it directly, rather than having others continue to run interference." After a moment's hesitation, Andrea nodded. "Okay, if you're certain. But I'm staying right outside the door, and if he upsets you in any way, I'm coming back in with security on speed dial." "Deal," I agreed, grateful for her protective instincts while also recognizing my need to handle this on my own terms. Andrea left to get Raymond, and I used the brief interlude to mentally prepare. This would be our first face-to-face conversation since the divorce was finalized. I adjusted the blankets, uncomfortably aware of my hospital gown and IV line. Not how I would have chosen to present myself for this encounter. When Raymond entered the room, his expression was a carefully composed mask of concern. He had lost weight since I'd last seen him, his usually impeccable appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd rushed to the hospital directly from work. "Eliza," he said softly, hovering uncertainly near the doorway. "Thank you for seeing me. How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I replied honestly. "But the surgery went well. I should recover fully." He nodded, taking a tentative step closer. "I was worried when the hospital called. They didn't give details, just said you were in emergency surgery. You shouldn't have been called at all," I pointed out. "We're divorced. I just hadn't updated my emergency contact information with my doctor." "I know," he acknowledged, "but when I got the call—" He trailed off, seeming genuinely at a loss for words. I studied him, trying to see past my own preconceptions and histories. "Why are you still here, Raymond? They told you hours ago that I didn't want visitors." He looked down at his hands, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "When I got the call, I just reacted. I kept thinking about all the times I should have been there for you with your father's situation and wasn't. And then I couldn't just leave without knowing you were okay. The sincerity in his voice seemed genuine, but experience had taught me to be cautious about accepting Raymond's statements at face value. That's surprisingly self-aware, I observed. A fleeting smile crossed his face. I've had a lot of time to reflect since the divorce, not all of it comfortable. An awkward silence settled between us, filled with the ambient sounds of the hospital, the distant ping of call buttons, the soft whir of monitoring equipment, the muffled conversations from the hallway. "I've been seeing a therapist," Raymond finally said, breaking the silence. "Started about a month after you found that book in my office." This caught me off guard. Raymond had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary processing of things better, left alone. One of many perspectives I now recognized as having been heavily influenced by Vivian. "That's good," I said cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I'm not telling you this to win points or change anything between us," he clarified, seeming to read my wariness. The divorce was right. What Mother and I did was inexcusable. He paused, struggling visibly with whatever he wanted to express. "I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand why I was capable of betraying someone I cared about. Why I let my mother's values override my own conscience for so long." I remained silent, processing this unexpected direction. "Anyway," he continued when I didn't respond, "I won't take up more of your recovery time. I just wanted to make sure you were all right, and to say that I'm sorry. Not just for the trust situation, but for all the ways I failed to be the partner you deserved." As apologies went, it was more substantial than I had expected. There was a humility to his words that the old Raymond, the one who had sat across from me in Mitchell's conference room, trying to minimize his actions as a misunderstanding, would have been incapable of expressing. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I appreciate the apology." Raymond nodded, accepting the measured response without pushing for more. "Is there anything you need? Anything I can do to help with your recovery or with James's care while you're here?" "No," I said firmly. "Andrea and Mitchell have everything handled. But thank you for asking." "Of course." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I've filed paperwork to legally change my emergency contact information with all medical providers. You shouldn't receive any more calls about me." The thoughtfulness of this practical step, addressing a problem I hadn't even considered, was unexpectedly touching. "I should do the same," I acknowledged. "Your friend Andrea already mentioned? She's helping you update yours tomorrow," Raymond said with a small smile. "She made it very clear to me at the nurse's station." Despite everything, I found myself smiling slightly at the image of Andrea's efficient protectiveness. "That sounds like her." Raymond hesitated at the doorway. "Take care of yourself." "Eliza, I mean that." After he left, Andrea returned immediately, her expression concerned. "Everything okay?" That looked intense from what I could see through the window. "It was unexpected," I said thoughtfully. He apologized, seemed genuinely reflective about what happened. Andrea looked skeptical. "People can say anything. Actions matter more." "True," I agreed, but he did one concrete thing that surprised me. I explained about his emergency contact update. Andrea said, considering this. "A small step in the right direction, I suppose, still doesn't erase everything else." "No," I confirmed. "And I'm not suggesting we become friends or that I trust him again. Just noting that people can sometimes surprise you, in good ways as well as bad." The conversation with Raymond lingered in my thoughts as I settled in for the night. Not because it changed anything fundamental about our past or my future path, but because it reminded me that human beings are complex, capable of both terrible betrayals and genuine growth. Recognizing this complexity didn't require forgiveness or reconciliation, just an acknowledgement that people, even those who have hurt us deeply, are rarely entirely static in their capacity for self-reflection and change. The next morning, Dr. Patel approved my discharge, providing detailed instructions for recovery and follow-up care. As the nurse removed my IV and helped me dress in the comfortable clothes Andrea had brought, I found myself thinking about the parallel healing processes occurring simultaneously in my life: the physical recovery from surgery and the ongoing emotional recovery from betrayal and divorce. Both required patience and attention. Both involved accepting temporary limitations while working steadily toward renewed strength. Both benefited from support rather than isolation. And most importantly, both were ultimately about reclaiming wholeness on new terms rather than attempting to restore what had been before. Andrea drove me home, where she had already prepared the guest bedroom on the first floor to minimize my need for stairs during recovery. She had stocked the refrigerator with easy meals, arranged my medications on the kitchen counter with a detailed schedule, and even set up a small table beside the sofa with everything I might need within easy reach: books, water bottle, phone, charger, tissues. "You've thought of everything," I said, genuinely moved by these tangible expressions of care. "That's what friends do," she replied simply. "Besides, you'd do the same for me." As I settled onto the sofa with a light blanket, I realized how profoundly my perspective on accepting help had evolved since the beginning of this journey. Where once I might have seen needing assistance as a sign of weakness or failure, I now recognized it as part of the natural interdependence that connects us all. My independence wasn't compromised by accepting Andrea's support. It was actually enhanced by the freedom to focus my limited energy on healing rather than struggling with tasks that someone else could easily handle. I called Morningside to check on your dad, Andrea mentioned, bringing me a cup of herbal tea. "He's doing well. They said he asked about you this morning. Seemed to remember you were having a medical procedure." The news warmed me. My father's moments of clarity had become increasingly rare, but they remained precious connections to the man he had been and the relationship we had shared. "I'll visit him tomorrow if I'm feeling up to it," I decided. "Even if he doesn't remember. I was in the hospital. I'd like to see him." Andrea nodded understandingly. "I can drive you. Just let me know when you're ready." The first week of recovery passed quietly. I followed Dr. Patel's instructions diligently, gradually increasing my activity level while respecting my body's need for rest. Andrea stayed with me for the first 3 days, then began dividing her time between her condo and my house as I became more self-sufficient. My colleagues sent flowers and a basket of books, while my students created a handmade card filled with well wishes and literary quotes about strength and recovery. On the 8th day after surgery, I felt strong enough to visit my father. Andrea drove me to Morningside Gardens, hovering protectively as we walked slowly from the parking lot to the entrance. "I'm not going to break," I assured her with a smile. "I know," she replied, "but Dr. Patel said to avoid overexertion and you tend to push yourself." She wasn't wrong. The tendency to override my body's signals in service of what needed to be done was a pattern I was working to adjust, part of the broader recalibration of how I approached self-care and personal boundaries. My father was in the community room when we arrived, participating in a group activity that involved sorting colored blocks. The aide supervising the session explained that such simple sorting tasks helped maintain fine motor skills and cognitive function, even for residents with advanced dementia. I sat beside him, not wanting to disrupt his concentration. He continued methodically placing red blocks in one container and blue in another, his expression serene and focused. After a few minutes, he glanced up and noticed me. "Hello," he said, pleasantly though without the flash of recognition I always hoped for. "Hello, Dad," I replied gently. "It's Eliza, your daughter." He studied my face, a furrow appearing between his brows as he struggled to connect the information with his fragmenting memories. "Eliza," he repeated. "You look pale. Are you unwell?" The perception startled me, both the accuracy of his observation and the momentary lucidity it represented. "I was in the hospital last week," I explained simply. "But I'm getting better now." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Hospitals are for fixing people. Good that you're fixed." He returned to his block sorting, then added almost as an afterthought, "Your mother worried too much when she was sick. Didn't want to burden you. Better to be open about these things." Tears pricked at my eyes. This jumbled reference to my mother's illness, which had occurred when I was in college, contained a kernel of profound wisdom that somehow had survived the ravages of his disease. Even in his diminished state, my father was still teaching me, still sharing the insights that had made him such a remarkable parent and guide. "You're right, Dad," I agreed softly. "It's better to be open." We sat together for nearly an hour, sometimes talking but often just existing side by side in comfortable silence. When it was time for me to leave, my energy flagging despite my determination, he looked up from his blocks with unusual clarity. "You'll come again?" he asked. "Yes, Dad. Very soon." "Good," he said decisively. "I like your visits, even when I forget them later." The self-awareness in this statement, his recognition of his own memory challenges, brought fresh tears to my eyes. I leaned down to kiss his cheek, inhaling the familiar scent of the aftershave he had used for decades, grateful for this moment of connection amidst the progressive disconnection of his illness. As Andrea and I walked back to the AE's car, she observed, "He seemed more present today than the last time I saw him." "The doctors say that can happen," I explained. "Periods of greater clarity between the declines. They're unpredictable, but precious." "Like finding unexpected gifts along a difficult path," Andrea suggested. The metaphor resonated deeply. The past year had indeed been a difficult path, from discovering my father's cognitive decline to uncovering Raymond and Vivian's betrayal, from fighting to protect my father's wishes to rebuilding my life as a single woman. Yet along this challenging journey had come unexpected gifts, a deeper understanding of my own resilience, a clearer vision of my priorities and boundaries, stronger connections with true friends like Andrea, and a more authentic relationship with my father as he moved through his illness. 2 weeks after my surgery, I returned to Dr. Patel's office for my follow-up appointment. The physical healing was progressing well, with minimal scarring and no complications. As she completed the examination, Dr. Patel asked about my stress management. "I've been following your recommendations," I told her. "The gentle yoga program, the journaling, they're helping." "Good," she said approvingly. "And how are things with your father? Any new developments there?" I described our recent visit, including the unexpected moments of lucidity. "The uncertainty is challenging, never knowing which version of him I'll encounter on any given day. But I'm learning to appreciate whatever connection is possible in each moment." Dr. Patel nodded. "That's a profound approach, one that many families struggling with dementia never quite achieve. They remain so focused on who the person was that they miss opportunities to connect with who they are now." Her observation crystallized something I had been gradually realizing through my experiences with my father. "I think I've learned to separate grief from presence," I said slowly, articulating the thought as it formed. "I can acknowledge the sadness of losing the father I knew while still valuing the relationship we have now, different as it is." "That's exactly it," Dr. Patel agreed. "And it's a principle that applies beyond dementia care. Many of life's challenges involve that same balance, holding space for grief about what's been lost while remaining open to what's still possible." The conversation stayed with me as I drove home from the appointment, my mind drawing connections between this insight and my broader life journey. In many ways, I had applied the same principle to my divorce and its aftermath, acknowledging the genuine loss of the marriage and future I had envisioned while remaining open to the new possibilities that had emerged from that ending. Raymond Zhao, unexpected apology during my hospital stay represented one such possibility, not for reconciliation, but for a more peaceful resolution than I had anticipated. Similarly, the deepened friendships with Andrea and others who had supported me through the crisis, my evolving relationship with Mitchell beyond our attorney-client connection, and even my renewed appreciation for teaching as a source of purpose and joy, all were possibilities that had emerged from what initially seemed like only loss. At home, I found a small padded envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a house key, my key to the home Raymond and I had shared, along with a brief note. Found this while cleaning out my desk. Thought you might want it for closure. Hope your recovery continues well. R. The gesture held no dramatic emotional charge, just a simple tying up of loose ends that we had overlooked in the divorce process. I placed the key in my desk drawer, appreciating the thoughtfulness without reading undue significance into it. This, too, was part of healing, recognizing that not every interaction with the past needed to reopen wounds or trigger defenses. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. The dogwood tree my father had helped plant was in full bloom, its white flowers luminous against the darkening sky. In the quiet beauty of this moment, I felt a profound sense of integration, of past and present, loss and discovery, endings and beginnings, all coexisting in a life that was unfolding with more complexity and resilience than I could have imagined a year ago. The voice recorder that had captured Raymond and Vivian's manipulation of my father had been returned to me after serving its purpose as evidence. I had placed it in my father's study at Morningside Gardens, reprogrammed to capture, not deceptions, but memories. His stories and reflections during moments of clarity, preserved for when those moments might no longer come. Life would continue to present challenges, expected and unexpected. My father's condition would progress. Financial considerations around his long-term care would require ongoing attention. My own journey of healing, physical, emotional, spiritual, would have its setbacks and breakthroughs. But I faced these realities now from a position of hard-won wisdom and authentic strength. The inheritance my father had structured so carefully still waited in trust, protected now from those who would have diverted it from his intentions. But the true inheritance he had given me was already active in my life. The ability to face difficulty with courage, to maintain integrity when others did not, to find my way back to joy even after profound betrayal. This legacy lived not in legal documents or financial assets, but in the person I had become through living the values he had taught me. As darkness settled over the garden, I remained on the porch, wrapped in a light blanket against the evening chill, savoring the peace that comes not from the absence of challenges, but from the confidence that one can meet them with an open heart and a clear mind. The voice recorder had caught a moment of darkness, but it had ultimately illuminated a path toward light, toward a life more genuine, more intentional, and more fully my own than I had ever known before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.